Hello, YouTubers. I've come to realize that I beat around the bush too much, so here's a cold open for you. We shouldn't put all the blame on D&D for what happened to Game of Thrones, because what actually happened to Game of Thrones wasn't D&D being stupid, wasn't D&D being bored, and wasn't D&D rushing so that they can go do Star Wars. What really happened to Game of Thrones was 2017. Do I still have your attention? If you know what I mean by 2017, then you probably know what's coming next. If you don't, stick with me and I'll get to it. But first, I want to say that this video is the third of a series called Game of Thrones, The Real Reason It Failed. My first two videos have a long intro I'm going to skip this time for the sake of brevity. Let's be real, it's for the sake of audience retention. But I do want to reference the first two videos before getting to the point. In the first one, I was arguing that the character assassinations that happened weren't because of poor writing. It was because decisions were intentionally made. In the second one, I argue that the fact that everything we loved about the show was destroyed so thoroughly means that it couldn't have been a mistake. It was much more likely that the destruction was intentional. I even pretended that D&D were the devil, so to speak. It was a figure of speech. You'd need to watch that video to know what I meant. But now in my third video of the series, after calling D&D the devil, I'm saying we shouldn't blame them. How come? Well, I'm not saying that they're blameless, that's for sure. Fuck the both of them. What I am saying is that this juggernaut called Game of Thrones didn't crash and burn just because two bozos decided that they were done with it. There was something bigger than that, bigger than them. Here's my motto. If you find yourself wondering how such a stupid and disastrous decision was made, ask yourself first if the thing you're looking at involves money or power. If the answer to either of those things is yes, then you're not looking at incompetence. You're looking at corruption. Because when money or power is at stake, incompetence is not tolerated and it's not accommodated. And there was a lot of money involved in Game of Thrones, and a lot more money to be made with a franchise like this. But there was power too. Stories have power. They shape culture. If you think fantasy is just fantasy, you're wrong. But I'll get into that later. So if Game of Thrones had started in 2000, it would have ended differently. But unfortunately, it started in 2011 and it ran long enough to hit 2017. The year of the crap, that's what I'm calling it now. It's 2026 and we have the hindsight now to see the patterns. The short word for it is woke, but I'm going to avoid that word because it might mean different things to different people. So I want to break it down more specifically. Let's do a checklist. What are the differences between entertainment that was produced before and after 2017? Representation of people of color, representation of homosexuals and transgenders, representation of people with disabilities, representation of fat and or ugly people, especially women, a shift in the dynamics between men and women, vilification of men and of masculinity, glorification of women but not of femininity. And what do we have less of? Less comedy, less romance, less eroticism, less nudity. And these might be more subtle changes. Less beauty, not just of people, but of everything. Less meaning, less hope, less idealism, more nihilism. A significant erosion of the line between good and evil that goes beyond morally complex. The gray is getting darker. The black and white are meaningless. And finally, consistent demoralization. Instead of trying to prove each one of these to you, my dear patient viewer, I'm going to go ahead with my argument because I can't afford to take too many tangents. It's already hard enough to keep my videos concise. Here's a calendar to help us visualize the show's arc. The first 6 seasons are 1 year apart and 10 episodes long. Seasons 7 and 8 are neither 1 year apart, nor are they 10 episodes long. That's another phenomenon that should be added to the list. Seasons 7 and 8 also happen to be in 2017 and 2019 respectively. Try playing this game at home. Think of shows that started before 2017 and ended after it. See if there's a change or a drop in quality. I've watched tons of people analyze this trend. Some say it's streaming services that have changed the landscape. Others blame COVID for everything. But personally, I have a theory, and this is just my theory, not based on any evidence I can share. My theory is that it takes longer between seasons because the culture is ever shifting. Messages are changing and it takes longer to put out a new season because what can be said one year can become taboo the next year. Let's just say that every year we get a new edition of Newspeak and it takes some extra vetting before a show can be put out into the public. To use Stranger Things as a metaphor, fans complained that as the action was building up and the stakes were getting higher and the pace was getting faster, the whole show screeched to a halt just so that they can shoehorn in a coming out scene that nobody cared about. Did they forget to check a box that season? And did they have to put that in their last minute or something? It's just my theory, and I'm not married to it. I might be completely wrong. So if you have more information or just another take on this, please do share your comment. I am interested to know. Getting back to Game of Thrones, I think these checklists actually made it impossible for the show to proceed from where it was in 2016, with the characters and their arcs as they were. People of color? All they had were the Dothraki and the Unsullied, a brown swarm that had no character or depth, and a couple who didn't have much to do once they hit Westeros. The best they could be in the end were two ex-slaves who owed their freedom and new lives to a white woman. Stuff that might evoke white savior moments. Gay representation had been adequate in Game of Thrones, but not transgenderism. They could have squeezed something in, I guess, but it would have been awkward. Though seasons 7 and 8 were awkward anyway. But they waited for House of the Dragon to do that, and it was still awkward. People with disabilities. I really believe that's why we got Bran as king. At the very least, if Bran could walk, he wouldn't have been king. He would have been ineligible as a white man. I also wonder why the boy who became the three-eyed raven, who was made king for that very reason, wasn't named Bran the Seer or Bran the All-Knowing or something like that. The Broken? Really? Well, guess what? I have a theory on that one too, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Fat or ugly women? Too late. All the actresses were hot and you can't just recast them. Best you can do is cover the bodies and defeminize the clothes. And the women. Now, these three bullets go together. Men, women, and their interactions. So stories no longer allow men any credit or glory. And the man who was poised as the hero was Jon Snow. The possibilities were endless for him. He was king in the north. He was secretly the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne, the last dragon. He was possibly the prince who was promised to end the White Walkers and bring the dawn. He could have been any of those things, or he could have been a martyr, a hero they sing songs about for future generations, someone who'd always acted with honor and whose sacrifices were written in history. But none of those things came to be. King in the North? After Jon had done all the fighting to get Winterfell back from the Boltons, the throne is handed to his little sister. I can't think of a single thing Sansa did to earn it. The prince who was promised, after all the sacrifices Jon Snow made to save humanity from the White Walkers, guess who drops in and gets all the glory? Littler sister. Aegon Targaryen, the last dragon and heir to the Iron Throne. No way. Once again, after making a huge sacrifice and killing the woman he loved to save Westeros, the throne is handed to Bran the Broken, while Jon is relegated to Queenslayer and sent off in shame back to the Wall. No recognition. All he had been was someone else's tool, whether he fought for Winterfell or fought for Daenerys. I've shared this theory before in conversations, and I get asked, well, if it was all about the women, then how come Dany didn't become queen? My answer to that will come later. Stick with me. I also want to talk about femininity. Strong female characters can no longer be feminine. I like Brienne of Tarth as much as the next person, but she's not a typical woman. Most women aren't tall or strong or trained to fight with swords. And that's okay. I mean, sure, she rocks, but my favorite female character was Marjorie Tyrell. Smart as a whip, that one. Extremely ambitious, but also practical. Very calculating when she was dealing with people like Joffrey or the High Sparrow or the people at large. She knew that you catch more flies with honey, but she wasn't without compassion either. She was the only person, real or fictional, who was horrified at Joffrey's death. She was shocked at her grandmother's confession. She was clearly disgusted at Tyrion's trial, knowing that he was innocent. She didn't do anything about it because of her loyalty to her family and her house. As a feminine and beautiful woman, she knew that by playing the little princess, she would be underestimated, and she leaned into the power of that, instead of complaining about how nobody taught her to pick up a sword and fight. Marjorie was the female version of Tyrion, and we don't have women like that anymore. The women we get now are so damn unlikable. By the end of the show, I couldn't stand looking at Arya's face. These women are so smug, and they're barely even human. Now let's talk about the dynamics between men and women by the end. There were two reunions I had been looking forward to in the show, Sansa and Tyrion, and Jon and Arya. After we got a very sweet reunion between Sansa and Jon in season 6, I was looking forward to Jon and Arya because their relationship was much stronger, and what we got was, Well, it was shit. Arya telling Jon that Sansa was so brilliant was, ugh. And Sansa and Tyrion? You'd think after everything he did to protect her when she had no friends in King's Landing, she could have appreciated him. He was the only person to step in and put his own neck out for her. You'd also think that she might have some survivor's guilt after the very same plot that saved her ass also put him in a prison cell facing execution. You'd think that after her marriage to Ramsay Bolton and that horror, she would have appreciated how he respected her right to consent. But no, the reunion was shite. Tyrion says the Purple Wedding was a horrible affair, and she says it had its moments. No sympathy, only some shit about how dumb he is and how wrong she was to think he was clever. What a total asshole. Every scene involving a man and a woman had turned into this. I have come to believe in my heart of hearts that this new kind of female representation is crafted to make everyone hate women and feminism. It's meant to divide and anger us and not represent women at all. Things have a funny way of being the opposite of their name, but I am not going to take that tangent. So back to the list. Comedy. That's not really relevant to Game of Thrones, but romance. Let's take a look at the Jaime and Brienne's saga, shall we? How did that go down again? Her virginity comes up in conversation, and Jaime decides he should do something about that. He walks into her room and acts all awkward, but not in a cute way. It's all awkwardness and no sentimentality. He doesn't say anything loving or kind like, I think you're awesome, or to me you're beautiful, sorry about that grief I gave you. Nothing like that. He keeps fumbling with his clothes until she takes over because he's useless. After that, it's hit it and quit it. I think people were split 50-50 on what they would have liked to see for this couple. Would they be platonic friends? Would they be lovers? I don't think anybody wanted hit it and quit it. Now back to the list. Less eroticism and nudity. This one is ironic because HBO used to be the cable you get if you wanted to see skin. When Breaking Bad was pitched to HBO, they turned it down because there wasn't enough sex in it. That's what HBO used to be. By 2017, we had decided that female nudity was too pleasing for the male gaze, and we're not doing that anymore. Oddly enough, sanctimonious as we are now, nobody is clutching their pearls over child grooming and incest. Aren't we selective? Maybe we need another conversation between Liz Warren and AOC to get us indignant over it. Now, how about the overall mood of the show? When I say there's less beauty, I'm not just talking about actors. I'm talking about everything. The sets, the costumes, the mood. In fact, try comparing early Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon, a show focused on a royal family no less. Beauty is out, ugly is in. Now let's talk about nihilism. After the show ended, I must have watched hundreds of videos reviewing the show, and when they describe how they felt about the ending, the most common words I heard were some kind of empty, as in, I feel empty inside. It felt gutted. I felt gutted. It was bland. I felt nothing. I was numb. I had checked out. It was empty, etc., etc. Words that make you feel like nothing means anything and nothing matters. In a word, nihilism. Now, let's talk about demoralization. If box checking was the reason Bran became king, demoralization was the reason he was named the Broken. Broken king, broken floor, broken city, broken kingdom. It was also the reason why Dany couldn't win in the end, because that would have made some fans happy, and they did not want any part of the ending to make anyone happy. Am I being too conspiratorial here? Of course I am, and I know this is a controversial take, but look around and tell me how much happiness they serve in entertainment today. The feel-good stuff is so 2010. I don't want to go off on another tangent, but I will make a quick reference to Yuri Bezmenov and his demoralization strategy. I think we've been served nothing but demoralization for a good part of the past 10 years, and not only in entertainment, but in every facet of life. So, what I'm saying really happened to Game of Thrones is, and let's see if I can put this together. It was 6 seasons in, and now the show doesn't fit into the new zeitgeist. So they decided to wrap it up and get it off the air ASAP, and replace it with spin-off shows that can be set up correctly from the beginning. House of the Dragon was centered around 2 female characters fighting the patriarchy, Valyrians being diverse, and throw in a transgender actor or character for good measure. We're still okay with the grooming and the incest, though. Game of Thrones was not only cut short, it was obliterated on purpose. Now, if you think I've gone full tinfoil hat and my theory sounds crazy, I will ask you to compare my theory to the official narrative, and I ask you to think long and hard about how believable that story is. Once upon a time, 2 boys liked a book and wanted to make a TV show about it, so they asked the author if they could have the rights. The author tested them to see if they were worthy. He asked them to guess who Jon Snow's mother was, and they guessed right. From that moment, they held the key. They owned the show, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The author said that the books that were already written carried enough material for many more seasons, but the two boys said, "Nah, let's wrap it up." HBO told them that they were willing to produce at least 10 seasons, make more money, sell more merchandise, keep their flagship show running for years and years. But they said, "Nah, we think that's enough Game of Thrones." Fans wondered why they wouldn't hand over the show to new writers instead of writing this horrible shit. But they had made their mind up, and there was nothing that could be done about that. Is that the story then? May I ask exactly who these two fuckers are that they held all this power? I wonder, since when do creatives do what they want without the suits interfering, with their talk about focus groups and all that? How many directors retain the right to the final cut of a movie? Not many. The ones who did were directors like Stanley Kubrick or Steven Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino. You kind of have to be a legend, or at least be tried and true, to get that kind of ownership. Are these two dickheads Stanley Kubrick material? I don't think so. Take a look at their professional histories and their personal histories, and the only thing remotely interesting you'd find is that David Benioff was born David Friedman and had changed his last name. His father, Stephen Friedman, was a prominent businessman and policymaker who used to be co-chairman of Goldman Sachs, director of the National Economic Council under George W. Bush, and chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And naturally, he had ties to intelligence. Now, that fact might mean nothing to you, but it certainly means something to me. Because what I have learned, way too late in life, unfortunately, is that the stories we are given, whether movies or shows or even the nightly news, are and always have been agenda-driven. When movies change their messaging, it's never to reflect modern audiences. It is to create them. We are the product. Once we understand that, we can understand why it is that Hollywood has been persistent in putting out movies that carry messages that don't resonate with people and losing money hand over fist doing it. Since when does a business no longer care about your money? It only makes sense if you aren't the customer, you're the product. It's called social engineering. And that, in my opinion, is what really happened to Game of Thrones. By the way, before I go, I want to apologize for my voice. I've had a cold. There's some sniffling, there's some wheezing. Please ignore that, and thank you if you're still here. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. It's